really want to start on time. Welcome, welcome. Party in the hallway. There's always those people, right? Well, thank you so much for coming out on this summer evening when typically we're all doing something else, something fun. But this is so important, and we are so honored to have our guest tonight. We have our member of Congress, Shawn Casten, and we have Shawn, our Illinois State Rep. So we want to give most of our time to our special guests. But I do have announcements because things are moving fast, and Indivisible is moving fast. So one of the things that is coming down from national is our strategy at the moment, because things have changed from just engaging for elections. Strategy at this moment is we want to get 3.5% of our population in sustained mobilization. This is something we can all do. We're all responsible. We've got to light up. We have to light up our friends. We have to light up our neighbors. Everybody has to do something. We've got to get out of our comfort zone. And we want to reduce immediate harm. We're all aware of the bill that just passed, and it's going to harm a lot of people. We need to make people aware of that. And so Indivisible will be focusing on that. And we need to build long-term power. This is going to be a marathon. We're only 6 months in and we're tired. But we can't go back. So a few other quick announcements. We've got a lot that you can do. I just want to alert you, there's a sign library. There's a group that makes signs on a regular basis. So if you need to pick up a sign and take it to a protest, help yourself. We also have a new project that just started called the Bridge Project. And that's with our friends in DuPage, Kelly. And if you've seen the pictures of those folks with the signs on the bridges, that's what they're organizing. So you can check that out.
Over 355.
Over 355.
If anybody's interested, see me after I
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to start trying to do that locally once I'm a little more mobile. So.
Yes. Okay, one of the other new things you could get involved in is to learn how to host a small house party. Okay, for virtual training with your friends and fellow members to show interest. Sign up on our wall posters for all these activities. Please sign up. Please sign up. So there are trainings that are going to go on that will be available to us, and we think it would be great if you ask your friends and neighbors to come over. We'll be screening some ourselves. Also, we need volunteers to make some welcome calls. Just to members who maybe they came to a meeting a while ago, but maybe we haven't heard from them. We have to activate all of our neighbors and all of our friends and all of the like-minded people. So we could use some help with that. Sign up on the wall. And there will be an immigrants' rights team. That is, if you have any interest in that, we have some things coming up. We don't have exact details yet, but if that's something of interest to you, we'll have an outlet for that. Also, we will have an outreach team. And basically, that's about institutions that we see complying with this administration's harmful and manipulative tactics. So we can't remain silent, and we need to identify those organizations and call them out and make them uncomfortable. Again, wall poster. And there is the Good Trouble protest. I'm mixing them up, I almost said no keys. Good Trouble protest on July 17th. There will be several protests around the area. You can look for that. If you think you want to have one locally, please sign up and help organize that. And certainly there's people here with experience who will give you our tips. But if you'd like to do one locally, have at it. And I think on the handout, You're elected officials. They need to hear from us. They need to know what's important to us, and they can speak to that themselves. So, without further ado, I think I covered it all. Okay. Mike?
Thanks, Patty. I'm Mike Waters. I'll be moderating this evening. I want to thank our guests for joining us tonight. We know the time is valuable, so we appreciate them sharing some of it with us. I'll do introductions. Congressman Shawn Casten was first elected to the House in 2018, serves the 6th Congressional District, which covers a large swath of the west and southwest suburbs, from Elmhurst on the north to Tinman Park on the south, Naperville on the west, Evergreen Park on the east. Do you get mileage? Do you get mileage reimbursement? He's a scientist by profession with bachelor's and master's degrees in biochemical engineering from Dartmouth, and has dedicated his life to fighting climate change. State Representative Shawn Ford was first elected to the Illinois House in 2006 and represents the 8th District, which includes parts of the west side of Chicago and parts of Berwyn, Cicero, Lyons, Oak Park, Proviso, and Riverside Townships in the suburbs. He's a graduate. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in education from Loyola and is a former Chicago public school teacher and is now a licensed real estate broker and insurance broker. And he's passionate about social justice issues and disparities in employment, education, and healthcare. Almost sounds like a beauty pageant, right? So we're here today to talk about House Resolution 1, the reconciliation bill, the big bogus bill, whatever you want to call it. And first, we're going to start just by recapping some of the lowlights of the bill, which is what we'll be talking about here today. A lot of the attention has focused so far on Medicaid and SNAP changes. The legislation imposes Medicaid work requirements for most recipients ages 19 to 64. Requires twice yearly recertification instead of once a year, which is a really big deal because the recertification is really complicated. It's really hard. And it also has new rules to qualify for subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that nearly 12 million Americans will lose their insurance coverage over the next decade because of these and other changes. It imposes more stringent SNAP work requirements, which start by the end of 2026. The Medicaid changes, by the way, the most serious ones, kick in at the end of 26 after, not coincidentally, the midterm elections. Same with the more stringent SNAP work requirements, which are expected to cost millions of Americans their benefits. There are funding changes for Medicaid and SNAP that will reduce the amount of federal funding states can use to support the programs. That's going to shift the big cost to the states, and they'll either have to absorb it, which isn't real likely, or they're going to have to make cuts in programs. In its continuing effort to destroy our planet, the Trump administration is eliminating tax credits for green energy initiatives and purchases of electric vehicles. Those will be by the end of this year for consumers and by the middle of 2026 for businesses. A lot of the attention, as I said, has been on Medicaid and SNAP, but some of the, I think, scariest and most dangerous parts of the bill are the massive infusion into our secret police force, otherwise known as ICE. The bill adds $30 billion over 4 years for ICE enforcement and deportation operations. It's going to allow it to hire 10,000 goons who will jump out of unmarked vans wearing masks to snatch people off the street or from their workplaces. ICE's budget is now 3 times higher than the FBI's, which is currently the largest federal law enforcement budget, and larger than the budgets of most of the militaries in the world. The bill also includes $46 billion over the next 4 years to build ICE detention facilities. It puts the annual detention budget at $12.4 billion, which is 50% larger than the budget for the entire federal prison system. And it's going to allow it to expand its detention capacity to nearly 100,000 beds, which is double the current level. And finally, it adds about $3 trillion to the deficit over 10 years, primarily to fund tax breaks that disproportionately benefit the rich and will saddle future generations with enormous debt. So I could go on, but that's enough to depress us all for tonight. I do want to say, so thank you again, welcome our guests in. Is there anything in particular, first of all, it's been difficult to sift through all the information and gather facts on the legislation, so I won't at all feel offended if you want to correct anything I've said, but is there anything else of particular concern that I haven't mentioned?
I mean, the only thing that you left out that's near and dear to my own heart is the elimination of all of the clean energy programs. Which, by the way, don't call it clean energy, call it cheap energy. The reason they're scared of it is not because it's clean, it's because the fossil fuel industry can't compete against it, right? So it's an attack on cheap energy that's going to cause the average Illinoisan's energy bill will go up by $400 a month. I'm sorry, $400 a year as a result of those cuts. So that's a big deal. But I would also just say when I was on TTW yesterday and they asked me, like, are there any good parts of the bill? And I said, you're sitting there, someone's serving you a horseshit cake.
Yeah.
And you're asking me whether, like, was it a free-range egg that you used? Really not the point. The headlines here are so bad, like, don't get bogged in the details. It's the biggest cut in healthcare in our country's history. It's the biggest cut in food assistance in our country's history. It's the biggest tax cut for billionaires in our country's history. And the total cost of this bill is bigger than the CHIPS and Science Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and the American Rescue Plan passed under COVID combined. So if you're fiscally responsible, you hate this bill. If you read the Bible, at least you got me on Leviticus, you hate this bill. Right? That's it. That's the headline. Right?
I don't really need to add anything to that. I mean, let me just first say thank you all for having this. And it's an honor to be on the platform with you, Congressman. He's a different.
I'm just a Shawn. You're
Yeah,
Russian.
I was going to get to that. He's a different type of congressman, and I'm happy that he's in Washington supporting. So I'm the black LaShawn. And he's Shawn. S-E-A-N. So, I mean, that's just the way life is, right? We both like our names, and it's working for us. But I think I would like for the congressman to talk also about the veterans attack. I mean, you know about that better than me, so I don't want to go in. I think that there's going to be some layoffs at the VA.
So I would have to, I'm trying to think, I think the piece that hits veterans hardest in the bill, if I'm not mistaken, is the way that the SNAP cuts are structured, because there's all these disclosure requirements. There used to be exemptions for people who have a hard time providing paperwork to qualify, specifically veterans, housed, formerly unhoused, and people who've been through the foster care system. All those exemptions went away. So you're now talking about, I think, something like 270,000 veterans formerly homeless and kids out of the foster care system are now going to have a really hard time getting food assistance. And, like, you know, just like think about like what we're saying. We're like, we didn't pay you a ton of money to defend our country. We didn't guarantee you'd come back alive when you defended our country. But the basic promise was that we'd treat you with some dignity when we got back. And now you're going to show up and say, well, you know, you're going to need to provide some paperwork before I'll give you a meal. You know, I mean, I'm not a religious person, but what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Right?
Is there one or two particular aspects of the legislation that most worry either of you?
So I'm going to hand it off to you for a question. I want everybody in the room to sort of be thinking about this. You mentioned that these cuts kick in 26. The tax cuts for billionaires start today. The pain starts in 26. I actually think that we are going to feel the pain well before the election, because, you know, for a lot of, you know, rural hospitals that are running in the red right now, you know, community health centers, if you're sitting there, particularly some of the ones that have been like, you know, that have been, you know, bought up by more financially minded groups, why would you sit there and say, I got 2 years of red ink and it's going to get worse? You're going to shut that down sooner. One of the things, and I'm going to hand it off to you on this, because so much of the Medicaid program is paid for by the states, it's a federal match, but we've made it harder for the states to figure out how to get the match. You're going to have a terrible budget cycle next year, because you're going to have to figure out, we know we have less money to play with, what benefits do we want to cut? And you're going to have every interest group coming to Springfield and saying, don't cut long-term care. And somebody else is gonna say, you gotta cut long-term care, don't cut, whatever else program. And I think if we're not careful, that fight is going to be weaponized against the people who didn't cause this by saying, well, why is Springfield, hurting these because those programmatic cuts will cut first. And so I'm just curious, like, how you guys are thinking about in Springfield, both like what that process looks like, and then how to make sure that we can make sure to keep reminding people this is happening because of what Mike Johnson and Donald Trump and Jonathan did, not because of what's happened in Springfield.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I think you're right. It's going to have an impact on the state budget. And, many people, when President Obama was president, he fought for the Affordable Care Act, and he fought and he gave it all that he could. It really helped Illinois' budget. It really helped county budget because it took the burden off of the state and the counties and provided health care for those that were not eligible for health care before Obamacare. They relied on emergency room care, and emergency room care was harmful to the state, city, and county budgets. So now, to your question, Waters, what's gonna happen with the cuts in Washington? Somehow we have to protect the people in Illinois. And if the funds are not coming down from Washington, then Illinois has to have a budget to protect Illinoisans. And so where do we get the money? And what's scary for me is it may cause us to raise taxes on people in Illinois to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. Congressman Casten also talked about our hospitals, our safety net hospitals, and our FQACs. They're going to be very much wrecked by the Republicans. What is it? These are Christians, and so I can't say, but the bad bill. I call it the kill bill. So it's going to really wreck our healthcare industry. So safety net hospitals like Loretto in the neighborhood where I live that rely on Medicaid. Nursing homes, they're going to be trouble because Medicaid is not going to be there to protect them. So either the state is going to respond by picking up the share that the federal government used to provide, or we're going to have to foot the bill ourselves. In normal years, the federal and the state work together for the people of Illinois. And so I'm afraid that that's going to be a challenge, not just for Illinois, but for the country. And I thank you, Congressman, for your work. I'm telling you, we did have, and I will put on record that we did have 3 congressmen in Illinois that could have stopped the bad bill, and that would be Miller, Boss, and the Hood. Could you imagine if they had did the right thing? They could have protected America.
Just one of them.
It was one. So thank you, Waters.
Just on that point, because I did some town halls in Boss District. There are about 137,000 people in the 6th district that I represent who depend on Medicaid. There's over 200,000 in my cross district. So like what you need to know about these Republicans, you go out and message like hit them for cowardice, right? They're proud of being evil, but they think they're full-grown men, right?
Yeah.
And just to remind people, like you found it harder to stand up to Donald Trump than you did to stand up for your constituents. Because it's going to hit red America. Those clean energy jobs, we're going to lose 890,000 clean energy jobs because of these cuts. 740,000 of those are in red districts.
By the way, we're phone banking into those 3 Republican districts, so to make sure voters in those districts know what their Republican representatives have done to them. So I would encourage you to, I believe that's part of the information that our newsletter, and so if you want to get the word out, we want to defeat them.
And there's a sign up right there.
Make phone calls. So midterm elections are gonna be some of the most important in our lifetime.
Yeah.
We've got to take back control of the House and or the Senate, and these are 3 vulnerable districts, so you can help make that happen. So I want to talk a little bit more about specific impact in the district, in our region, and in the state of Illinois. And I've touched on some of the numbers, but Representative Ford, you talked about Loretto Hospital. Are there other, certainly those safety net hospitals, those that serve a high number of Medicaid patients, nursing homes that have a high number of Medicaid patients that will be some of the most vulnerable. But what other kind of impact do you anticipate in this district?
Well, I mean, when you think about protecting the safety net hospitals and the FQACs and people that rely on Medicaid, that's a workforce. And so it's and I would thank you for the meeting that we had, that you called to the attention that not only are you may not be impacted because you may not have Medicaid, but someone in your family may have Medicaid, may need SNAP, may have someone that is autistic, that may have some need to have some form of Medicaid, and it's going to be cut off because of the Republicans. So I think that that's important to recognize, that some people will sit at home and think that I'm okay, but they have to look at their Rolodex and realize that there's someone that they love, their neighbor, that's going to be cut off of Medicaid, and that's going to impact all of our lives.
So this is so much worse than I think it is. And I don't want to make you sound bad, but some of the things you said earlier on were wrong. You said there's 12 million people who are going to lose their health insurance, or 17 million people who are going to
I've
lose their
seen
health
numbers
insurance.
all over the place.
The difference, and the Republicans are not being totally honest about this, surprise. We have automatic pay-go sequestration that kicks in, that cuts Medicare benefits if we blow through certain fiscal limits. This bill will cause us to blow through those limits. That means that Medicare is going to get cut by $500 billion with a B dollars. Now, the Republicans will argue that when we've hit those constraints before, Congress has voted to ignore those limits, and indeed we have, and that's a fair argument. However, the CBO also says that this bill will add to the deficit by $3.5 trillion, and that calculation assumes that current law is in place, which assumes that we do not expand Medicare. So you can choose, either this is a $4 trillion hit on the deficit, and we're going to protect Medicare, or it's a $3.5 trillion hit on the deficit, still bad, and a bunch of folks on Medicare eligibility lose their money. The second thing is that even if you have the absolute best private insurer, no deductible, plan in the world, your quality of care is going to go down. Because anybody who was previously, every time I visit a community health center, I wish I was eligible to use them, because they're fantastic. You get it's like the care we all got when we were a kid, where you've got, you don't have to go, halfway across town to get your blood work done. The dentist is there, everything's in the same spot. Well, if folks don't have that, they don't get preventative care, which means that instead of saying I got this little lump on my shoulder, what is it? You run to the emergency room because you're into stage 3 cancer, which means that the emergency rooms are going to get totally overloaded. So all of us are going to get less quality of care. The hospitals are going to be the hospitals that are in good financial position are going to be hit with much more charitable care, which is going to make it harder for them to stay in business, right? So all of that stuff is going to hit, and the whole healthcare system starts getting a burden on this. And I want to just give an example of how these things ripple through. They just have layers of evil. Let's say right now you're a parent who works. You are not Medicaid eligible, but just barely. You're struggling to get by. And you got a special needs kid who goes to a day program that is funded by Medicaid. And when your kid goes to that day program, that's when you work. Well, now Medicaid shuts off that day program. So now your kid's at home, so now you got to stop working. Well, now you go to Medicaid and say, hey, I got to get on Medicaid now. And they say, well, we've got work requirements. Think of how evil this is, right? And those consequences ripple through. And so, and when we're saying, well, there's, however many Medicaid eligible people who are affected. This is going to force people who are not Medicaid eligible into scenarios where they would be Medicaid eligible, except now they can't work. Right? Like, if you hate America, you should love this bill. I mean, there's two people who should love this bill. People who hate America and people who have billionaires, private chefs, personal doctors, and yachts, because you got a tax cut. Yeah, Elon Musk is psyched.
You mentioned, we talked too about the sick in the hospitals. It's important to remember too that, especially in rural areas, these hospitals are the largest employers in the community as well. And so,
They're also just like on that. So Shamari Figures, who new member from Alabama. Remember when John Roberts said that we were in a post-racial era, so we didn't need to have Shelby versus Holder anymore? And then that same Supreme Court said, like, oh, it turns out like Alabama was violating the Voting Rights Act, and we got to create another majority African American district. I'm still waiting for John Roberts to be like, yeah, I got that wrong. Shamari Figures represents that new district. His district goes from Montgomery, Alabama, down to Mobile. And he was telling me that he has 13 counties in that district, Montgomery County, Mobile County, and 11 in between. Every one of those 11 has only one hospital, and every one of those 11 has been run in deficit for the last couple of years. So they're probably shut down. And what Shamari was telling me, he said, like, the human stories are horrible. But he said, I want to attract businesses to come and locate in my district. How do I get you to come and build a factory in the district if you say, well, can I raise a family here? Not if you plan on giving birth. Right? Like, what does this do to rural America? It's like an elegy for hillbillies, isn't it?
So what can we do? What can we all do to minimize the harm and to try to fight back?
So I want to try to give just a couple pieces of optimism. The last time Trump was the president and he controlled both houses, yours truly got elected in the wake of that. We had the biggest freshman class since Watergate. We flipped 40 seats. Of the 40 of us who flipped seats that election, the average Republican we beat had won by 15 points in 2016. That's not to say everybody who had won by 15 moved over, but the seats that are in play are bigger than you think. And so, like, thing one is, like, be hopeful, and if you work, you get there. Thing two is you need to be very clear-eyed and, like, honest with yourself that if something is working, do it again louder. If something isn't working, don't get all precious about it. And the measure of success is not how many clicks your video got on YouTube. Like success has to be measured by, are we driving down Donald Trump's favorability rating? There's not a single Republican in Congress who's capable of leadership, but at some point they'll stop following this jackass. And if he gets less popular, that goes down. We're seeing the unfair with this bill is 2-to-1 unpopular. Getting people to understand it, getting out in front of the messaging. If the Republicans were proud of it, they would be doing town halls this week. They are not. But they're going to figure out some lies that stick. So I think getting out there early, messaging on this, being very intentional about what you do. And I think that the last general thing I'd say is to, I was raising some money in my last job, and we were going to Wall Street doing these pitch meetings, and the banker said to me, he said, I need to tell this to engineers when they go to Wall Street. If you go to France and you ask where the bathroom is, and the person says, no parlez bay, you don't say, I said, where's the bathroom? She was like, when a banker asks you a question, a banker, don't yell engineer at them. And I think in the same way, for us to drive those Republicans out, we need to speak to Republicans, and you have to speak Republican to Republican. Don't yell Democrat at Republicans. And when I do these town halls in Dixon and down in Cartersville, I love going to Dixon, leading off by saying, I've always thought that America's a great shining city on a hill, and if that city must have walls, make sure it has doors and windows so that all who want can come inside. Because the day America stops welcoming immigrants to our shores is the day that America cedes its position of leadership in the world. That was Ronald Reagan, son of Dixon. And if you find that uncomfortable, maybe you're not fit to carry Reagan's legacy. Maybe you're not fit to carry Lincoln's legacy if you question whether the good guys won the Civil War. Maybe you're not fit to carry Nixon's legacy if you're annoyed at the guy who created the Environmental Protection Agency. Maybe you're not fit to carry George Bush I's legacy if you question whether the United States should be the leader of the free world. But I speak Republican to Republican because these people, they'll be more persuaded by that. And, that was how these seats got flipped in 2018. And so, repeat that playbook.
Well, I would think that, I think it's important that we have, so congratulations on this event, because we cannot sit idly by and let America think that everything is okay. Because as the Congressman spoke, he said, you probably won't feel the impact right away, but the rich people will feel the impact right away. They'll get their tax breaks. So having events like this is important so that people understand that there is a problem and that it's worse than we think. And we have to remind America that the bill that is now law is harmful to America. And so a lot of times when we have bad things happening, people sit back and they feel all alone. Having this type of plan where you're going to have phone banks and you're going to be calling people to remind them that things are bad and you don't have to sit at home alone and suffer in silence is very important. And we have to remind the people in the Republican districts that they're voting for the wrong people. They need to know that the people that represent them, like LaHood, Boss, and Miller, sold them out and they betrayed them. And thank you for calling into the districts, letting them know, because had they stood their ground for their people, the kill bill would have died.
If anybody has questions, so we're gonna question, well, no, we're taking them in writing.
Yeah.
So if you just
Yeah.
hand your cards to,
You need a card. I need a card. Patty? She needs one. All right.
so I think the message then is to, you're all here, so you're already involved, right? So we thank you for that. Stay involved, get more people involved. The administration is trying to overwhelm us. It's trying to wear us down. We can't let that happen. So we have to keep up the fight. We're making progress. We're chipping away. Trump's approval rating is sagging. As that continues to happen, more Republicans will be willing to distance themselves. We do phone banking. We're doing postcarding in other states. So get involved. There will be plenty of opportunities. There will be ways to touch individuals. I talked briefly at the beginning about the recertification requirements in Medicaid. I worked for Catholic Charities for 10 years before I retired, and one of the things that we did was to help people apply for Medicaid and food stamp recertification. It is a complicated process, it's a daunting process, and Republicans are counting on people failing to do that. That's how they're going to kick people off the rolls. That's how they're going to cut the Medicaid budget by $1 trillion over 10 years, is by intimidating people into losing their benefits. And so we can't let that happen. So there will be volunteer organizations that will help people with that recertification process. And it's a great opportunity for one-on-one involvement with people, a way to each one reach one. And so there will be a million things that we can do. There's going to be a plethora of things you can do either through Indivisible or through other organizations. So stay involved, get more people involved, and we will win. We will win.
No, I have a comment. I know this line, we have time for that. That's fine. No, that's all right.
So for
Thank you.
So one question for Representative Ford, has there been any discussion at the state level about getting some laws passed to make ICE agents identify themselves and remove their masks? Apparently states do have the authority to do that sort of thing. What do you think about that?
I know that there are some states that have filed legislation to make sure that we ban wearing masks for ICE agents. I even got a call from a former pastor at my church and said that, would you introduce legislation to say that you can't wear masks? And, you know, I'm not sure if we could tell the federal government now, look to see what the Congressman says, if we could tell the federal government what they can and can't do with their jurisdiction, but that's something that is being discussed, that the federal agents, when they are doing their raids, cannot wear masks and they have to identify themselves. I'm not sure if this, if we have the authority in the state to tell the federal agents what they can and cannot do, but I'm open to dialogue and being on the right side of this issue.
So what can and should we do to try to protect our immigrant neighbors? What are we able to do?
We voted and we passed legislation in Springfield to make sure that we protect the humanity of people. So there is a law on the books to protect. And I think that in Chicago and across the state of Illinois, we've been doing a great job of protecting individuals in the state of Illinois, pushing back and educating people on how to protect themselves if these ICE agents come to their community. So Chicago is doing a good job. I think Illinois is doing a good job protecting the sanctuary state and city. But of course, we're in a different climate and a different time where this administration doesn't respect the law. And so he and this administration really want to do everything they could to and can to provoke and just send everything to court, because he liked being in court, as you can tell, 36 felonies, and so it's like a place for him. And so he wants everything to be tried in court, and if he throws it against the wall and hopes it sticks, if it doesn't, he still did something to disrupt and cause problems. So we should give a lot of credit to our Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, who's fighting the Trump administration and all of his problems that he's bestowing on us. So Kwame Raoul is our friend, the Attorney General, and we increased his budget by $15 million to fight the Trump administration's mayhem that he's putting on the state of Illinois. So it's all about the courts, and that's where I feel strong about, that the democracy is strong because we do have the courts that's gonna push back, and they've been doing a good job, in my opinion, pushing back on this administration and what he wants to do to our country. And so that's why I personally feel strong about our democracy, and if we continue to have meetings like this across the country, we will send a message to our Supreme Court and the courts to make sure that we protect our democracy. And that's the strongest fight that we have.
So I'm going to be a little philosophical here. Before they agreed on the Constitution, James Madison said that a country based on the rule of law depends on the virtue of the people who lead it. But to expect that all the people who will lead a country are virtuous is a chimerical idea, and therefore we must depend on the virtue of the people who select them. And like that has always been the bet of a country based on the rule of law. And so it is, it is factually true that everybody in this room, regardless of your immigration status, has the right to due process under the Fifth Amendment. You've got a right to no unusual search and seizure. You've got, under the Fourth Amendment, you've got a right to a prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. You've got a right to equal protection under the 14th Amendment. All of those things are clearly the case, right? And to anybody who says, well, that only applies to citizens, tell me how you prove you're a citizen if you don't have due process, right? Some of you look a little brown, right? That can't be the basis for due process. So the question really becomes like, so what do you do if the people who we hoped would be virtuous, who are responsible with executing and enforcing the law, are ignoring those laws? The courts are supposed to be the place that holds it, but if you ever do a tour of the Supreme Court, they will tell you as they walk you through and talk about all the stately architecture and what this is supposed to symbol, that on every pillar in the Supreme Court, at the top there's an owl that symbolizes wisdom, and at the bottom there's a turtle that symbolizes the slow and steady pace of justice. And every time I go take people on that tour, when they get to that point, I'll ask the docent, so I read this guy once who said justice delayed was justice denied. How does the court square that, right? The best court in the world is slow. And I think, like, you know, some of these, the answers to the questions of what we can do get pretty dark, like Schindler's List kind of dark, right? Some of the questions about what we can do within the context of our system is, you know, there are a lot of good people. Democracy Forward is one that we've been working a lot with, who are leading the litigation effort, who are working on cases. Everything we talked about, from ice masks to these enforcements and protections, there are courts working through, you know, people doing heroic work, our Attorney General and others, to take that through. Get engaged in those. If any of you are lawyers in the room, I think the bar associations have done a really bad job of enforcing their codes of ethics. If you're a lawyer who is going into court and asserting that you can just ignore parts of the Constitution, that's a violation. Like, those people should be disbarred, right? And I think giving some pressure on folks to do that, or make them feel uncomfortable. Dave Min, who's a new member, really smart guy, the old Katie Porter seat, he led the effort to put a letter together to all the big law firms who folded, and said basically, you need to be warned that if you knowingly accept a bribe, you can be found guilty and prosecuted, you know, under various statutes, including RICO, and you need to, like, you know, come through. And so, like, reminding people of that stuff matters. The last thing I just say on that is that and if any of you have been to my town halls, you've heard me say this all the time, but it needs repeating. If you find yourself angry and nervous that the executive branch is not obeying the Constitution, is not obeying the rule of law, that the legislative branch is not doing their oversight job to hold them into account, and the public at large seems too apathetic to the risk of this. If you're angry, if you're nervous, you should be. If you're surprised, you're probably white. Right? Because when we passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, we went 100 years before our country even began to enforce those laws.
I knew it.
Right? I'm trying to be black, Shawn. But like, you know, and I don't want us to take 100 years, but we got to the point of finally passing the Civil Rights Act of '64, not because people in power said, if you elect me, I will enforce the laws on the books. We got there because the people who were being disadvantaged didn't give up on America. And they, you know, Martin Luther King's great line when he went with Johnson, and Johnson said he couldn't do the Civil Rights Act of '65, and Raphael Warnock tells the story better than I do, because in my next life I'm going to start as a preacher in a black church. But he tells the story that when they walked out and Johnson said, I can't do this, and one of the people with King said, that was depressing. He said it was empowering. He said the President of the United States said he didn't have the power, so we got to go give it to him. Right? And so, like, the question in this moment is, we know that love has the numbers. All we got to do is prove that love has the courage.
Amen. He's got to be a preacher.
We'll be putting out information over the next few weeks about things you can do on immigration matters. We're going to look into Know Your Rights training. There will be canvassing where you could hand out Know Your Rights literature to businesses and workplaces and other places where people will benefit from that knowledge. We're going to look into setting up a rapid response network that would respond to ICE sightings. So we'll be rolling that information out over the next few weeks to everyone. We've had a few questions about elections. You know, Trump has openly mused about the fact that you won't have to vote again. Now, he throws a lot of shit out there, right? So, but first of all, do you think there's any chance of that? And if there are elections, how can we be sure that our votes are fairly counted?
Who does that go to?
So I'm much, maybe I should be, I'm not particularly concerned about whether votes will be fairly counted. And the reason I say that is because our election process is so fragmented. You know, to actually change the outcome of votes, I'd have to talk to the precinct in Brookfield, who would then have to get rolled up into the county, officials at Cook who have got other audit training, who's then gonna go to the state, and by the way, your ballot is different from yours because you're in a different judicial district, it's a lot of work to change ballots. There's a much cheaper and cost-effective way to change the outcome of elections. We've been doing it at least since Reconstruction. You just suppress certain populations from voting. And so that's, I think, the much bigger concern that we will, that we'll see on election day. Blacker and browner communities are gonna have fewer polling places, because they always do, right? We will see, I think, very little enforcement of federal election laws against disinformation that might be put out by dark money groups, as Elon Musk did before. And I think we just have to expect that they are not going to play fair. And do the hard work of democracy of getting people registered, getting them rides to the polls, making sure that they're educated, and do it with the confidence that nobody likes what they're selling, right? We're in a race right now between, is democracy going to destroy the Republican Party, or is the Republican Party going to destroy democracy? And the answer to that question depends on what we all do.
Somebody asked about the SAVE Act. It threatens women's right to vote. How can, sorry, I can't read the writing here. How can we prevent this from happening?
So the Senate hasn't passed it yet. Call your senators and make sure they use the damn filibuster.
Yeah.
Right? This for those who don't know, this is a saying that you've got to provide identification in order to vote. Identification is nice if you're a rich person with a passport. Identification is nice if you still have your birth certificate. Identification is nice if your last name matches the name on your birth certificate. For 84% of married women, the latter fact isn't true, and so it's a very targeted suppression. Like I said, voter suppression is very cost effective, right? But for that did pass the House. For that to pass the Senate, it would have to clear the filibuster. And so, just make sure that our Democratic friends are prepared to use the filibuster.
So this one's for you, Representative Ford. Given that the federal government isn't willing to tax the rich, how about the state? Can you guys slap some taxes on rich people?
I wanted to bring that up, so thank you for whoever wrote that question. When I think about what's happening now, so I think that it's clear who the Republicans represent and who the Democrats represent. It's clear that Trump has proven that the Republicans want to make sure that he gives breaks to rich people. Democrats have proven that they want to tax rich people. There was this thing called the fair tax, and it failed in Illinois because Ken Griffin did it, yes. And then he's out of town now, thank goodness. But it's really clear that Democrats want to tax the rich, and the Republicans, not only do they not want to tax them, but they want to reduce the taxes. So we have to figure out a way to get the message out that we have to bring revenue in from the rich. Because now, because of Trump, the people that's making more money in Illinois will have more to pay in Illinois if we do the right thing by passing a fair tax bill and turn it into law. Before Trump passed this tax cut, my sentiment on the fair tax was we probably should just let it rest because the people have spoken. But your question is clear. I think we need to raise it back now, because now the rich is going to get richer and Illinois is going to pay the price. So I would say that we really should have meetings on whether or not the fair tax should be ignited again. And I think one of your state reps here in Riverside, Rashid, has a bill for the fair tax. And I talked to him about it. I said, listen, I don't know if I can support that because the people have already spoken. And they said that they don't want us to have a fair tax in Illinois because it was on the ballot. And you don't have to tell me if you voted for it or not, because I'll just go look at the ballots. But I would say that this is something that we should really be thinking about, because this is one way to try to at least level it in some way in Illinois while we get the federal government on track.
So a couple of people have asked similar questions. Since the most harmful aspects of the reconciliation bill take effect in 2026, at the end of 26, is there a chance that a new Congress could block them, stop them from taking effect?
Well, so, barring some extremely fortunate health accident, Donald Trump would still be the president at that point. So we have to have, veto-proof majorities in the House and Senate, which I think is probably unlikely. Something that I think would be really helpful from a grassroots effort. Trump's first tax bill, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, blew a $2 trillion hole in the deficit. Everybody, including yours truly who flipped seats, campaigned on this is a terrible bill, this is a mistake, we never should have done this. We never had a serious conversation about repealing that bill, right? And we didn't in part because I think there was a lot of concern about politically, if we vote to raise taxes, admittedly they shouldn't have been, cut so far, but if we vote to raise them, is that going to have political blowback? Well, we then passed a 10-year reconciliation bill with all these clean energy taxes in it, and they repealed that one right away. And I would like to see us in a position where we could say, maybe it's 2028, repeal the whole bloody thing. But for that to happen, I think there needs to be some good grassroots mobilization so that we're not in a position where, a lot of people who have not been in leadership for very long, have not been elected very long, are nervous about their next election, are nervous about our ability to hold the majority. I'm not saying yes, it was a terrible bill, but if I go and raise Jeff Bezos' taxes, and Elon Musk's taxes, they're going to come and on a bunch of dark money, they're going to hit our most vulnerable members. And so, we'll fix the Medicaid stuff, but we're not going to do anything to address these structural problems. And I think we need some support on the outside, I think, to create the public will to make that possible.
So, I love you provocative people. Is it possible for Illinois, and this is for Representative Ford, for Illinois and other blue states to stop paying federal taxes because of no representation?
I would say that one, we should be looking to get more taxes from the federal government. We're a donor state and we don't get as much money from the federal government that other states get. So I would think that we want to do our part as Americans and make sure that we protect our students that's receiving FAFSA from the federal government so they go to college, and our seniors that are receiving Medicare and all the other programs. I see Mary Ann is here. She gets money from the Park District, from the federal government. So we want to make sure that we are paying our fair share. And I think what's more important than not paying taxes is getting our fair share back from the federal government. That's going to be bigger for Illinois, and it's going to give us more say in when we talk to our Congressman Casten about bringing more money back to the state of Illinois. So, if you all say we don't want to pay taxes, you could convince me to fight with you. But to answer the question, my perspective is let's get more money from the federal government back to the state.
So we've had a few questions along the same lines about what's the plan? What's the plan for Democrats? Do the Democrats have a plan?
Please tell us there's a plan.
Is there a plan equivalent to the Republican strategy of 24 and are you applying pressure to leaders up the ladder? This questioner says, nationally there appears to be little pushback beyond the visual photo ops. And what's the red state strategy? So talk to us about the strategy. What's the plan?
Well, we have a very detailed plan, but I don't trust you guys with it.
We don't need a signal.
So, yeah, exactly, Hexit knows it.
It's on signal.
So let me just challenge a little bit the premise of the question. Let's time travel back to 2017, right? We had, Trump was in, people were pissed off. Kavanaugh had been confirmed, there was all that rage of what was going on in our society. Can you tell me what the plan was that caused the Naperville City Council for the first time in history to gain Democratic control? Because that was that April municipal election in 2017. It was the first bellwether out in DuPage. And then a couple months later, what was the plan that caused Connor Lamb to flip that seat in Pennsylvania? That people started saying, well, there's something in the water, that stuff is going on. And we tell ourselves, in hindsight, that there was a robust, solid Democratic message. Nancy Pelosi led the charge. This was a referendum on health care, and it was the vote to defund the ACA, and we had a lot of people who did that. But I'm not sure that's actually the way history played out, right? And, again, I repeat stories because it's my job. When I was down 3 months before John Lewis died, I went down for the last walk across the Selma Bridge with him, and everybody knew that he was nearing the end. And so everybody came out for that last walk across the bridge. So Ruby Bridges was with us, Jim Lawson was with us, the Abernathy children were there, the parents had passed at that point. Bernie Lafayette, just like these icons, people you read about were all there. And I was talking to Chuck Neblett, who was one of the Freedom Singers at the time, and he's telling me these amazing, unbelievably brave stories about learning nonviolence from Jim Lawson and standing up to people and all the rest of the stuff. And finally I said to him, what was it about, what Martin Luther King said, what Rosa Parks did, that created courage for people who knew that people who did what they were being asked to do got lynched? What was it about their leadership skills that caused that to happen? And Chuck said, it's a mistake that we assume that leaders create movements create leaders.
That's right.
He said once there was a movement, we needed someone at the front of it, but the movement existed first. And so I said to him, I was like, so what do you think was the thing that created the movement? And he said, look around this room at all these, gray-haired folks. He said, all of us are Emmett Till's age. And all of us were at a point in our life, when Mamie Till had that funeral, that we believed we were invincible. And that was what created the movement. And I said, I'm not ducking the question, right? But I think, when it's not like folks sat down at SNCC and said, we're going to have a sit-in at Woolworths, and then we're going to have a freedom ride, and then we're going to have the 1964 civil rights. And you go and read those stories, they did a lot of stuff that didn't work. They did a lot of stuff where one part of the movement was pissed off at someone else in the movement for not understanding the dynamics of the moment, and you shouldn't do that over here, and that doesn't going to play in this community. It's the same as we're at right now, right? And I think what has to happen is not that we know what the plan is, but that we say we are going to be unbelievably courageous in trying 3,000 tactics at once, and when a tactic works, we're going to spread the word and we're going to do it again louder. And when a tactic doesn't work, we're not going to be precious about it, right? We'll go out there. We're doing the TV shows. We're messaging on the things that stick, and when it works, that's doubling down. Hakeem is doing his floor speech. Cory Booker's doing his thing. Some of us are doing things that don't work too, right? But I think all of us, that's the job, right? And just knowing that people prefer what we're selling, but you've got to find the way to make it work, right? And I don't know what that is, but I know that we're all in it together.
Want to take a stab at that one?
I will, and it'll be quick. I think it's clear that there's a side that you could take in this fight, and you don't want to be with Republicans. You want to be with Democrats. And it seems to me in communities that I represent that being a Democrat is looked upon as being weak. But believe me, the Democrats are strong. Democrats are really working to strengthen America. Think about it. If America was run for years by the Republicans, what it would be like. And I think that let's take a side now, and you have a better shot at making sure that the Democrats bend towards justice. There's no bending Republicans. They're gonna break you. So let's be with Democrats, and it's gonna work out for us, and let's run those Republicans out of Illinois. It's gonna be big. We did one. Who was it that we ran out? Someone said, Ken Griffin, let's run more out.
But just the one caveat, but elected Republicans, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm serious, like, I mean, they're getting a lot of those people, like, those people, you're gonna swing those races 15
Yeah.
points, you're gonna get people who thought of themselves as Republicans, were like, oh, you know, now that you point that out, like, I'd rather be on your team.
One of the questions was, how do we talk to Republicans?
It depends on the
I mean,
Republican.
look, in my first race, I used to tell people, if you think the good guys won the Civil War, the good guys won the Cold War, and the Enlightenment was a step forward in human progress, then you're a Democrat, you just don't know it yet. You know, and then you walk through, but like, I mean, it's what I said before, just, you know, speak to them in their language.
And I think humanizing the issues is really important, you know, being able to tell those human stories, the impact of this. So somebody else.
Just on the subject of like Republicans, there's this weird, I mean, not to use an overly buzzy word, there's this weird toxic masculinity in the Republican Party that like you prove how tough you are, you know, by being a bully. And, you know, I would submit to you that the bully is the second weakest kid on every playground, because the bully only punches down. The weakest kid on the playground is the kid who's standing behind the bully saying, yeah, I'm with him. And the toughest kid on the playground is the kid who gets in the bully's face and says, you come for him, you gotta come through me. Right? And I think there's a framing that, you know, and I think this was really, my view, what really resonated in 2018 was, yes, the healthcare message was important, yes, the rule of law stuff was important, but think about those moments, those candidates that went viral, you know, Abigail Spanberger leaning into the microphone saying, say my name, say my name, and like, who was the one who looked stronger in that moment? You know, I mean, the stuff we did with Roscoe, why are you not doing town halls, I'm gonna walk through, like, there was this sense of like, and I don't mean to like make this overly gendered, but there was the sense of like, which one is a real man?
That's right.
And because the Republican Party has been so captured in this cult, I mean, for goodness sake, Donald Trump is selling T-shirts that has his face and it says "Daddy,"
Yeah.
right? Like that's a real thing that these people are doing. I work with people who walk around wearing Donald Trump's face on a tie and shoes, and like, at least on my playground, that'll get you beat up. Right? And so I do think, like, as far as like talking to Republicans, there's a way to sort of co-opt that and saying, if you want to be, you know, if you want to be on the, you know, on the team of like the tough guys, that's us, because we're the ones who are actually standing up to the bullies.
Well, speaking of buzzwords, somebody asked that we have to name the problem. We need a shorthand phrase to pin budget problems and other negative impacts on Trump's big bad bill. We can't always go into detail. So I don't know, like a catchphrase. So all got any ideas? Maybe, okay, at the bottom of these sheets, if you have a catchphrase, you know, just some buzzword, some catchphrase we could use. Let's share it, but I don't know, off the top of your head, like, putting guys on the spot, I know.
So Brian Butler, that's how you put it, saying, had a thing on Twitter this morning saying we should refer to the big bad bill as Trump care.
So, this one might be a little bit too much in the weeds, but how does someone who has what does someone who has an expiring green card do? And if you don't know the answer, maybe who would know the answer?
You get 20 people to go with them.
I would say, like, if you're a constituent of mine, call our office, and we've got some good caseworkers, and there's other social services groups out there as well. Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question, but there are legal ways to take care of it.
What does, okay.
Hey, what does someone with an expiring green card do?
So this questioner says, they get emails from groups claiming they have a way to work around and shut down Citizens United. Is that true? And how long will it take for, oh, no, it's different. Sorry, Citizens United, is there any way to do anything about it?
Without legislation.
So speaking of, so there's been a thing on social media, this is mine, about voting machines having been hacked in some areas in the 24 election. I assume you guys have seen this. Is it, I mean, do you guys think there's anything to this?
I mean, I would caution, I've heard that there's like a dozen things on social media that are not true.
That's why I haven't shared it.
I'm not saying anything about that.
I would say that we should have a recount, because I don't think that Trump won.
So the Young Democrats of Lyon Township ask, how long do you think it will take for America to come back from this bill? And by the way, thank you guys for being here and sponsoring. They threw a last minute shindig in LaGrange on No King's Day. So how long will it take America to come back from this bill? Will renewable energy be able to recover?
So let me answer the first part first, because the first answer is really depressing. It takes an arsonist a day, a really lousy arsonist can burn a house down in a day. A really good carpenter can build one in a year. It will take decades to restore what's already been broken. If we recreated USA tomorrow, who's going to go work there? How long is it going to take for our allies to trust us with intel again? Right? Like these are like big, huge structural problems. You know, would you believe that the next administration, if it's, you know, if we get a Democratic administration, would you believe that the next Republican administration would slip back, or we get back to some sort of normalcy? And it's gonna take decades to fix that. On the clean energy side, I'm somewhat more optimistic because of what I said at the start, that clean energy is cheap energy. There's nobody who has a solar panel on their roof who doesn't have an incentive to run it every day because the sun is shining. You know, they don't wake up and say, is the price of electricity high enough for me to justify that panel? There's no one with an electric vehicle in the driveway who says, I better check and see what the gas price is today before I drive my EV. There's no one in a well-insulated home who says, I might rip the insulation out now that because I don't want to be too woke. Right? And so, like, broadly speaking, the incentives in the IRA for clean energy were to lower the cost of buying that technology, and the subsidies we have for fossil fuel are to lower the cost of operating those technologies, because everybody with a coal plant every morning is looking to see whether they can make money buying coal and turning it into power today, right? So expensive energy has a hard time competing. I think what's going to happen as a result of this bill is that it is going to be harder for people without means to access that technology, because if you don't have, you know, the $30,000 to put solar panels on your roof, then you don't have access to cheap energy, right? That creates wealth inequalities, but the people who have the wealth are still going to deploy that. And you know, before the IRA was passed, in the 15 years prior to the passage of the IRA, coal use in the United States fell by 50%. Oil use was flat, didn't move, and natural gas was, while it was growing, basically decoupled from economic growth. And we now generate more power from non-hydro renewables than we do from coal. That's because of capitalism. It's not because of the IRA. The IRA was accelerating that, but those structural trends are still going on. It just is going to be, the deployment is going to be a little bit less equitable. And you know, I think the estimates were that the result of this bill is an extra 9 billion tons of CO2 emitted by 2020, and you get to pay more for that.
Shawn, what's the IRA?
That's the Inflation Reduction Act that had all the clean energy incentives in.
So I'm afraid we're about out of time for this part of the meeting. I do want to give our two guests a chance to offer any closing remarks. Representative Ford, you want to go first?
Well, thank you for doing this. I think this may be the first in the district and probably in the country to have a meeting post the bill. So thank you
Hey, we're
very
on the
much.
cutting edge.
Yes. And, this is what it's going to take. I do feel that there's going to be, at the end, people are going to appreciate Obamacare. Even those people that didn't appreciate it before, that wanted to repeal it, I think Obamacare would be like the phoenix, and it'll rise again and be stronger, and America will be healthier, and that would be great for America. Thank you very much, and it's really an honor to get to know you even more, Shawn. I'll tell Congressman Davis that he's in good company with you.
Well, thank you. I probably talked too much, but I guess I just make the observation that for fascism to work, people have to be afraid to stand up individually because they're worried that they might get knocked down. And there's a whole lot of people in this country right now who are saying, I'm going to keep my head down because I don't want to get noticed, because I don't want to be singled out. And what I've had this conversation with everybody from university presidents and bank CEOs, but it's as true for everybody in this room. When there is a threat that if you stand up individually, you might get lopped down, you got two choices. You can sit down or you can stand up collectively. Right? So go kick some ass.
Thank you all so much, and I just want to make an acknowledgement. Shawn Kirchman, President of the Young Democrats of Lyons Township. I know we have some other elected officials here, if you want to, Elise. Lyons Township. So,
You got another little shot?
so we encourage everybody to stick around and socialize after this. We have several events coming up. There'll be all sorts of things to do. Petitions for both candidates are going to come out in August. You know, we all need to get out there and keep the good people in. So there'll be a lot more activity as it goes forward, but we're we feel tired, but this is a marathon. We're only 6 months into this. And so pace yourself, but be active. If you feel like you can do a little more, do a little more. And get your friends, get your neighbors. We have got to get that 3.5%. Simply has to happen. And we, like our representative said, we're it. Nobody's coming to save us. They're doing what they can. We gotta do it. So let's go. We've got community events. Pardon? Oh, sign-up sheets. Sign-up sheets.
So sign up for something, people
I love
sign up.
Mary Ann Quinlan, who keeps us all together. Thank you very much. And I think we are, any other?
If you have any other suggestions or comments, we now actually put our email address and website address on the top of those sheets that you're all handed. You're also, anyone who signed up for this meeting is going to get, well, hopefully I'll get around to sending the email that actually has the links as well. So you just get a copy of this with active links, so you can just click to sign up. It'll also be posted on our Facebook page and in our next newsletter.
Okay.
Thank you for
So
coming. And
we're
stay
on the
on.
highway. We're not turning back now.